Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have an 11-game Major League Baseball slate. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? We don't have any weather issues today. There might be a little bit of rain in a couple places, but it's not going to affect the games too much, so that's pretty good news today, unlike yesterday where there was lots of rain everywhere. Let's go ahead and get started here on this one. Let's start with our pitchers here. And we're going to start with Scherzer for the Texas Rangers. He's obviously the play of the day. He's facing Oakland. He's only had 2 games in the last 9 under 22 fantasy points. He's been really solid, and he faces a great matchup here. He's got a lot of upside, and even though his price is a little bit high, since he's probably going to get in the 20 to 25 range, he's definitely viable as a great option on the slate. Luis Goelito is also in play for the Angels. Now he's a decent contrarian off Scherzer. He's been solid in Chicago, though in 2 games with the Angels he's been bad, but he did face really tough opponents. It gets a little bit easier today, and even though I still like some bats from San Francisco, he's a good contrarian play, and he's capable. He definitely has some potential for a pretty good game here. Then we'll look at Luis Urias for the Dodgers. Now he has had 3 games over 22 fantasy points in the last 7 starts. He's also had 3 negative scoring games. The matchup isn't ideal, but his upside here is good. If you pitch as well, which is a 50-50 game basically. So he's got the upside, but he's high risk, high reward. Then we'll look at Gilbert for Seattle. He's faced San Diego early this year and scored 27 fantasy points. He's got a decent upside here. He also getting a lot of wins despite not getting a lot of strikeouts. His upside is in the mid-20s. 15 to 25 range is probably where he'll land today. And I do think he'll be on the upper end, as I do like him as a pretty good option today. And then Kikuchi for Toronto. Sorry for butchering your name. He's facing a team that doesn't strike out much, but he's also pitching well right now with only 3 earned runs giving up in his last 4 starts. His K rate has been inconsistent, but it does generally hurt his upside, but he does have some upside, and a 15 and 20 point game is definitely not out of the question here, even with a little bit more upside as well. So let's go ahead and get into our catchers now. So we're going to start with William Contreras from Milwaukee. He is fairly expensive today at $4,800, but he's hitting the ball extremely well. He's scoring fantasy points even without home runs, and that gives him a lot of upside here. He's had some really good games recently. He's also not striking out much, and he's getting hits in most games, giving him a nice upside on this particular slate. We'll also look at Will Smith for the Dodgers. Now, he's been somewhat inconsistent. Recently, his batting average has really taken a little bit of a dive, but he has still managed to score fantasy points in bunches. Despite that, as you can see, he's had 4 10-plus fantasy point games in the last 5. However, he does need to score over 14 fantasy points really to pay off here, and he's been getting pretty close to that. So he's very capable on the slate. And then for a little bit of a cheaper option, Salvador Perez. If he draws a start today, he'll be interesting as a decent play from Kansas City, as he has a pretty good matchup here, and if he does play today, he'll have some nice utility for home run potential as well. Maybe in the first base, we're going to start with Freddie Freeman. He is a core play for me today against Arizona. He's hit the ball extremely well with a .463 batting average over the last 10 games. He is hitting 2 home runs through that stretch as well, but he doesn't necessarily need a home run to pay off here, as he's been getting a lot of multi-hit games. I really like his upside in this matchup, and he's a great play on the slate. Matt Olson is also in play for Atlanta. He's also been hitting the ball extremely well. Of course, he's been hitting a crazy amount of home runs, as he's had 7 in the last 10 games. Even without a home run, he's been scoring fantasy points as well. He's averaging a ridiculous 16.5 fantasy points a game over that stretch. I really like his upside today, though he is very expensive as well. He does play as a decent role today. Lamont Wade Jr. has really good potential today for the Giants. He's been hitting pretty solidly, pretty much right on standard. He has some nice home run metrics today, which give him some upside, and he's nice and cheap, which gives him some extra viability as well. Carlos Santana for Milwaukee is in play. I do like Milwaukee bats today a little bit, but they are somewhat hard to roster as they haven't been hitting all that well recently, but they do have a good matchup against Kyle Freeland, and he has been inconsistent, but he does draw some home run upside in this one, but he has been striking out some, which is a concern here. Jake Bauers has been really good recently, hitting the ball pretty solidly and hitting 4 home runs over the last 10 games. Obviously, he's nice and cheap, which helps you pay up at other positions if you want. And his upside, he can also play in the outfield, which is definitely a helpful thing as well. And then Tristan Casas for Boston. He's in an interesting spot here as he hasn't hit the ball particularly great from a average-wise but he is hitting some decent amount of home runs, and he does draw good metrics for this one. I do like his upside as a result. Then we'll look at Mookie Betts at second base. Oopsie, Mookie for the Dodgers. He draws some good metrics for this game. He's hitting the ball very well. He's having some good home runs. He's also got a stolen base a couple games ago, which gives him some added upside. If he can get another home run and have his third straight game with a home run, then he would definitely pay off here. He does need to hit a home run really to pay off at this price range. Jose Altuve for Houston also in play. Now he's been hitting the ball really well so far this season. He's really improved recently as well, and his home runs are starting to flow. His stolen bases are also happening a lot now, which gives him a lot of upside on the slate, and especially being almost $1,000 cheaper than Mookie. And then we'll look at Albies for Ozzy for Atlanta. He has been pretty solid recently. He's starting to hit really well again. He's been up and down throughout the season, but the last 4 or 5 games he's really been hitting well. I like his home run potential again, as well as since he did hit one yesterday. He also just had some multi-hit games as well, which gives him a lot of upside here. He's hitting the ball very well. Then we'll look at Justin Turner for Boston. Now, he's been somewhat inconsistent throughout the season, but he's hitting the ball about as average as he's been throughout the year, and he has really good home run metrics for this game, though he is a concern for having a low fantasy point game, as he does tend to have some of those occasionally. Then we'll look at Rengifo for the Angels. Now, he can play second or shortstop. He's hitting the ball pretty solidly with a 333 batting average. He's also scoring a decent amount of fantasy points when he can get multi-hit games, which he is capable of doing, especially in this matchup where I do like him a lot. He's really improved recently, and he does have a little bit of home run upside as well. Not a ton, but he does have a little bit, so he is viable from that perspective as well. And he's nice and cheap compared to some of the other guys at this position. And then Nico Horner for the Chicago Cubs, also in play. He's been pretty solid lately. He's been a little bit streaky, but he does draw good hitting upside in this one. I don't know if a home run's in his feature here, but he's definitely got some good hitting metrics for this game, and so I do think he's a viable option, kind of as a contrarian play. Maybe in third base, we'll look at Rafael Devers for Boston. He's been really inconsistent throughout the season, and while he had a really good stretch a few weeks ago where he hit the ball very well, he's starting to be a little bit inconsistent again. He is still getting a lot of hits, but for his price range, he tends to need to do more than just get a hit or two. We do need to hit some multi-hit games or some doubles and home runs, so I do think he's a viable option today, but he does feel a little bit risky today at his price range. Alex Bregman is also in play at third base for Houston. He has not hit the ball well recently, but he has been good throughout the season with home run upside. He's not had a home run in a few games. I think it's been about 8 games, and he's only had one fantasy point game that's been good in that stretch. But he does have some potential in this game as he faces a really good matchup for himself. So I do like his upside from that perspective. Then we'll look at Davis for the Giants. Now, I do think that the Giants are kind of a sneaky stack today against the Angels, who have some risky pitching, who I do like a little bit, but I do think it's a little bit risky. He's hit the ball pretty well with some home run upside recently, and that gives him a lot of utility here, though he has been inconsistent. He doesn't play every day sometimes, so do keep that in mind. But he does draw good metrics for this game, and his price range is relatively reasonable. Chris Morel for the Cubs, also in play. He's been really inconsistent recently. Obviously, he started the season off with a bang, but he's been striking out a little bit too much recently, and he's not starting every game. But if he does draw the start, and he hasn't finished some of these games as well, if he does draw the start today, he'll be interesting, though his price is a little bit expensive. And then Eduardo Escobar for the Angels looks like a really interesting play if you want to stack some Angels. That is definitely a capable strategy today. He has been up and down throughout the year, but he does draw good metrics here. I do like his upside if he starts, so we'll have to wait and see if he does play, though. Then we'll look at shortstop and Bobby Witt Jr. For Kansas City. I really do like Kansas City a lot for some of these specific matchups, and Bobby Witt has hit about as good as anybody on the slate with a 419 batting average over the last 10 games. He's also had a ridiculous amount of RBIs and several home runs, including some stolen bases as well. He's managed to score fantasy points in lots of different ways. He draws really great metrics for this game, and he's one of the top options at this position today. Lindor is also, though, a guy that's worth taking a look at, as he's also hit the ball really well recently with a 432 average. He's had some big games as well, though he doesn't have as much stolen base potential as Witt does. He has been getting a couple of them occasionally, and he's had 5 straight games over 10 fantasy points, though we do need him to get a little bit more than that today. You could also play Luis Rengifo at this position. Dansby Swanson also in play here, as he's hit the ball fairly decently throughout the year. He goes up and down, but he's getting more home runs recently. He does tend to strike out some, though, when he's hitting a lot of home runs, but he does draw the good home run potential today, and I do like his upside on the slate. And then Ahmad Rosario for the Dodgers, also in play today, as he's hit the ball very well since he's joined the Dodgers, and I do like his potential. He's getting some really good hit games and also scoring some RBIs, which is really helping boost his fantasy points. He's even got a couple stolen bases since he's been there, so I do think he's a viable option as well. Maybe the outfielders, we're going to start with Acuna for Atlanta. Now, obviously, he's Ronald Acuna. He's hitting the ball extremely crazy. Stolen base potential, home run upside, everything like that. Yesterday he didn't actually do anything, but he should bounce back today and have a bit good game, as he said. A lot of good games recently. I like his potential here. His everything about how he's playing has been solid recently. Aaron Judge also in play for the Yankees. Now he draws some interesting upside here, despite the fact that he's been kind of rough since he got back from injury, but he didn't hit a home run yesterday, but he did manage to score 12 fantasy points, and he definitely draws good upside today as well, though we do want to see him start hitting home runs before we start going all in on him again. Jordan Alvarez also playing extremely well with almost a 360 batting average over the last 10 games. He's also hit 4 home runs in that stretch. He's been really solid recently. His price is a little bit hard to roster, but he's definitely viable on the slate. Kyle Tucker is a contrarian option for Houston. He has not hit the ball very well recently, but he is still managed to get some stolen bases, which are helping his fantasy points, and so that also keeps his price up here. Then we'll look at Jarren Duran for Boston. Now, he has been pretty consistent throughout the season for the most part. Pretty good hitting upside, but he has had some bad games recently, though he does draw really good metrics here for a potential home run. I do like his upside, though his price is a little bit higher than I typically like him to be. Michael Harris is a core play, as he's actually a little bit underpriced for what he's been doing. He's hitting ridiculous 353 average over the last 10 games. He's also hitting some home runs, which is helpful. He also has a little bit of stolen base upside, though he really hasn't had the stolen bases that I expected him to have this season. But part of that is he hasn't been as consistent getting on base this year. But right now he's hitting pretty solidly, and he's definitely worth a look here against Pittsburgh in a matchup where he can definitely pay off. Then we'll look at Jock Peterson, who has been inconsistent recently. He does tend to be a little bit streaky, but he does have home run potential in this game, and so that's why I have him listed here as a viable option. Roman Lariano is actually now on Cleveland, appears. So even though he showcases the Oakland here, hopefully they fix this before the game start. But he is in play today if he draws a start for Cleveland, as he does have some low-end home run upside in this particular matchup. So do keep that in mind. Alex Verdugo also in play for Boston, as he draws really good metrics for this game. He has actually some pretty good home run upside in this matchup, though he hasn't hit the ball very well recently. He's had a couple multi-hit games, and that does give him some viability as well. And then Brian Reynolds here for Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh has been somewhat inconsistent, but they scored a lot of runs yesterday somehow against Strider. And Brian Reynolds is also in play today. He didn't do a lot yesterday, but he got walked a couple times. But he's hitting the ball really well recently, and that gives him a lot of upside. He's also got home run potential, and this is one of the weaker pitchers for Atlanta, so I do like their potential here. And then Jack Sawinski for Pittsburgh as well. He's not been nearly as consistent as Reynolds has, and he's not been good very much lately, but he does draw good home run metrics in this game, and so I do give him some viability here. With that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.